Hello. Today I'm going to show you how to do a Verdaille, and I'm going to be doing this as a portrait, and I'm going to be showing you how to bring your portrait from the Verdaille to a full finished portrait with color, and I'm going to be reiterating a few things on the color scale as well as the value system, and help walk you through this. And I'm just going to do a demo and show you some of the process that I go through. So first off, just to recap on the contrast scale. And if we looked at our values, a 10 being the darkest, you see it would be a very dark black and goes on from the browns all the way to the violets. So if you looked at a 10 being dark black or a very dark violet or a very dark green, and then going up to a 1 where that would be the lightest of the grays and peaches, etc. So when I say a 10, a 1, a 5, etc., that is explaining lightness or the darkness of your color. The midtones are usually the highly saturated values. So those are the most brighter colors. And then when you start tinting them with a lighter color such as white, you get up to higher on the value scale. And if you shade them, say with not so much a black, black you can use, but if you used a complementary color to the color that you're using, that can darken it, shade it, as well as naturalize it, which is taking down the saturation and it sort of pops it back into the background a bit. It's not so much a star, but it does help the painting come along. So we're going to start here, and I'll explain as I go a few things. So I've started here, I've put a few colors together. What I'm using for my Verdaille is a Viridian, a green, and I'm adding touches of ultramarine. I've also got titanium white. I've got lemon yellow, and I've also got some alizarin. The alizarin is like a type of red, and it is a complementary to a green. So if you were having the color scale, we have our red here and we have our greens here. If you add a complementary to your color, that will naturalize it. And that's good for many things such as shadows, etc., which we can talk about later. So let's just start here. Now what I'm going to do to begin, I'm going to be putting in my most darkest values. And when I've already pre-made some of this, and I mixed some of my Viridian, I used some of my ultramarine, and I knocked it back just a little bit with my complementary alizarin. And I have a pretty dark green here, and I got this without even having to add black, which actually will deaden your color somewhat. So I'm just going to start putting that in, just getting in my darks. Now when I'm looking at, oh, first of all, the eye, I want to make sure I don't lose my eye. It's a good reference spot to go to when I'm working around the face, and I don't want it wandering around. So I'm just going to make sure that that is an obvious. So I know where the eye is now. Now I'm looking at my dark values and I'm looking at those as a shape. If we look at here, I'm looking at this dark value of this area as a particular shape, and I'm just going to pop that in there. We've got some dark value there. We've got some here, just going to accentuate some. Under the mustache, there's some heavy shadow there. I'm just going to accentuate a little bit of the ear, a little bit behind here. Let me see. Where else can I put some of my darks? I'll just work out some of that there. Okay, I've got an idea of where everything is. Okay. Now I'm going to put in my lighter values. So I have made on here, I've got some Verdaille. I added some of my lemon yellow. Now, as I do this, I've made a nice color here. I like this color. I think this is going to work well. But I also want to have a shadow and a tint of this, I think, because it's going to come in handy looking at this. So I'll keep this here, add a bit of white. So I keep it, and add as I go. I'm getting lighter on the value scale. I'll clean off my brush very well, and if I'm also taking this, I'm going a bit darker with my established darks and getting that up a bit darker. Maybe add a little bit more green to that. So I've got a nice little mix here to pick from. So having said that, I'm going into my very lightest of the green. I think I'm going to need a bit more of that, so I'm just going to add some more. Excuse me while I get this half decently correct. All right, so I have a light value. Now, just to let you know, I am cutting this with Gamsol. Now, Gamsol is a solvent. It is what I am using to clean my brush with, as well as to thin my paints with. This is good when I'm starting a painting. It's watered down. It'll dry a bit faster, but it'll also give me the freedom, the looseness to get some things started on my composition. As I go and I start making some more layers, I will be adding some mediums. My medium of choice is the linseed oil. Linseed is fat. So I'm starting off with a lean, which has no fat in the solvent. After that, I start having less lean, going into more fats. If I use a Gamsol oil paint mix after having used fats and letting it dry, it could crack. So that's one of the reasons why you adhere to the fat over lean principle. So I'm just going to put in these light values. Let's lighten that up a wee bit more, and just breaking in where those extreme lights, that's pretty much a 2 on the value scale. And I'm just popping these in and figuring out where they go. Now, I'm feeling pretty confident about my pencil sketch. One doesn't want to rely too much on having your pencil sketch exact. You don't want to be playing paint by numbers here. If you draw something and then just fill in the lines, you will get a very contrived, overly controlled looking painting. And it's good to try and steer away from that and just keep it loose. Try and enjoy your process. You will enjoy your process more if you're not being so particular about details right from the get-go, especially. Details are not the end all to anything. Details are something that you worry about after the fact, if at all. You need to have a good structure, and by working your values, where your lights, where your darks are, where certain values might sit nicely together or where they might be strongly opposing to each other, all these things come into play. So I'm just throwing in these colors here. So those are much my lighter values, and then I'm just going to do a nice little mixture of the dark and the light together around a 5, and that's going to be my mid value. And we'll just pop that mid value in there, filling up some of these areas. Okay, and then I'm also going to be working on the background. I have a rather dark background going on here. I'm just going to add a bit of my red to knock that back. Now that's a good dark color. And we're getting some good contrast. So I could work on that a little bit more, but you can see I'm getting to a point where I essentially would get to about here. So if we could see that, okay. So by looking at this, 1 second here. Opa. So from here, I could start, I've got my basic values in here, and now I could start to tighten things a little bit more. And by that, I will be getting a smaller brush. I still like the flat brushes when I work with oils. And I've just got a smaller flat brush. This is a 10 by Curry's. So I could go with a very, very small brush, but that would, I would be a little bit too particular. And this isn't the stage for being particular. So then I'm going to be going in and just looking at certain areas such as where the dark values are, and I'm just going to start redefining these just a little bit more. So we've got where the eye area is, and where the mustache is. Under the mustache, we've got some more dark areas, a little darker here. Bring that down. Let's just soften that a little bit. So just by tightening this up a little bit, so you can see I'm just getting in there and softening some areas. And then we get to, so this is the finished Verdaille. Well, if we can see this very good. So it's basically like my photograph. I didn't do it exact. When I do a commission for a portrait, I am being more cognizant of the features, and that, you know, I'm going to get a likeness. For this, it didn't matter if I got a likeness or not, although he's pretty cool looking. But just going from here, still fuzzy, hopefully I can show you all right there. So from this, I've got my finished Verdaille. Everything's all skippity-boo as far as where my values are. So from here, and this is good and dry, so I wouldn't be painting over a Verdaille until it is good and dry, because I don't want my underpainting to be mixing on my palette or with my brush. I want it to stay in the background, and I'll utilize it as I need. Okay, so I'm going to get some fresh Gamsol. And I have pre-made some flesh tones. I'll just call it flesh tones. So obviously, flesh tones are different depending on the sitter. For this old Caucasian man, bit of a ruddy texture to him. So what I'm going to do here, now we established that a dark value is a 10, a 9, and an 8. And here, those are the dark greens. Now I can go over those dark greens with a dark color that I want to use, flesh color. Okay, so let me just find my photograph. 1 second here. Okay. But this is the photograph that was my reference picture. So from here, I'm going to look at, say, my dark areas here. Looking along there, on here, it's more of a burgundy sort of color. So I'm going to, I've put some linseed oil right here. And I've put that into a little cup here. So by taking a little bit of linseed oil, wetting my brush with it, make sure it's clean. I'm just going to get some clean paper too. Okay. So I'm taking some of this that I made here, and I made one of those crocodiles, starting with an orange. I added a bit more alizarin as I went. I just took a type of an orange color and I sort of started working it down. I can work it, I'll show you as I go how I'm working these particular flesh colors. So with this, I've got a cad yellow. I've got the alizarin. I have made, that's a very vibrant, beautiful orange that those two colors make together. But I need to dull that down for this particular area. So with this, I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to go back and forth with this, with the alizarin and that, until I've got a dark value. Now this is pretty much a nice little burgundy. It's low saturation. And let's see how this works out. I'm just going to I'm going to make a bit of a glaze actually first off. A glaze is just extra medium, extra liquid that you cut your paint with. So it's like a water, when you have a watercolor and you have extra water, it comes out translucent. You can see through it. That's essentially what a glaze is. So each medium, you would have something different. With oils, you're going to cut it with a medium. So, which is the linseed. So I've got a nice transparent one. I think I just want to fix that color a wee bit more. And okay, I have put in one bit here. Let's just sort of work this down here. Okay. So I'm cleaning off my brush and I'm just using the paint that I have put on here, and I'm moving it around with a clean brush. So there we go, moving that around. And the one good thing about oil paint is that it does stay wet for quite a long time. So you were able to manipulate your paint. You can manipulate it while it's on the canvas and do all sorts of interesting things with your paint. So here I'm just working in some of those darker values. We're just really changing this up into, there we go, getting those dark values in there. A clean brush is your friend. If you're maneuvering things around on the canvas, sometimes you want to just use the paint that you've got there, and having a clean brush will help you do that. Now, once I'm happy with what I have there, and I might want to go over it with a thicker paint, I could do this at a later time. But in the meantime, I'm just sort of working this out, where I'm going with these particular choices of color. I want to be careful about this area. I like this area. There's sometimes little areas that you'll have on a painting that are kind of end up precious to you. You have to realize whether or not it's precious just because it looks nice in that particular spot, but it doesn't help the overall picture. Sometimes you have to get rid of those little things, and it's hard to do. This particular thing is good though. This highlight here, you've got quite a shadow going on here, and then you've got that contrast of where the light hits the nose, and it will be a rather nice part of the painting. So I want to make sure that I don't lose that. I'm going to go in just with a lighter value just for the moment here. So I'm going to try, let me see. I'm going to take some of my orange that I have here. I'm going to add a little bit more alizarin, working this as a little crocodile. So if I have a color that I've made before, I might not want it now, but I might want it later. And this way I'm not making a great big glob of paint. I'm feeling my way through my palette. So I had an orange here. I added a bit of alizarin. And from that alizarin, I made a little bit more so it's quite bright there. Now I'm going to take this alizarin, add some titanium white to that. And just put a little bit on there. It's kind of a mid-tone. Some of these would be okay. So I'm just going to pop some of this in there because I'd rather like this particular color. Doesn't mean I'm going to keep it. I don't know yet. But it's not bad for a mid value. So I'm just popping that in there. Right here. So it's pretty pink, this bit there. It'd be nice to get that into the ear. Certain areas on a face, blood seems to go to like the tip of the nose and the tip of the ears, etc. And capturing that can be quite nice, especially when you get into like a painting of an elderly person. I'm just going over some of those darks that I put in there because that's reddish color is coming out as more believable. Okay. All right, so I've got a bit of that, and now I'm just going to go into a pretty light value. Now for that one, I'll use another mixture. I'm mixing up some of my orange, and I'm going to add, okay, now I've added some titanium white to this, and I've come out with a rather nice peach. I think that's pretty nice for my light value here. So I'm just going to pop that in. That's going to save that area where the eye is. This is where the nose is here. And we just bring that all together here. Okay. There it goes. Okay, so we're getting somewhere here. Just I've got some light value, some dark value. So replacing what I had as on the Verdaille, and now making this into a full color portrait. So this is where we're at. Let me see. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to where I can see the color. It seems to be a little bright here. It's a little difficult. Okay, there we go. Oh, we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting used to videos. I'm not used to that. So as you can see, I'm starting to work those shadows, those highlights and everything, and it's starting to look like a portrait a little bit more. So now I'm going to go into the hair. For the hair, I want to use a bigger brush. This is, the heck is this? A 20, it says. Okay. When I go to a store and I buy a brush, I'm never looking at the number. I just look at it, goes, yeah, that's a big one. I want it. I never look at the numbers, so that's why I had to. Okay, so now we've got some medium. I have dunked a fair amount of linseed on there. Just going to put it down here. Okay, that's pretty wet. We'll see if that works for me. I'm going to take my titanium. So I want to make a bit of a mixture with this, but I do have some extreme highlights. These are like a 1, and I just want to put some of those in there. This is where the hair goes behind the ear, which is kind of a neat little characteristic. And this particular area of the mustache, by adding my extreme light value here, I'm also giving more of a 3D look to my portrait. This is going to, by this being light and everything else being dark underneath it, is going to bring it forward, which will give that illusion of a three-dimensional face. So we're just adding in some of these highlights there. Definitely on top of the nose there. There we go. There's a little light there. And bringing these down. It comes out a little bit to here. Okay. Okay, so I've got those highlights, and I just want to make, just gonna see, usually with a light color hair, there is sort of an ochre sort of under color to it. So I'm just making a little bit of ochre, and I'm going to put a little touch of titanium with it. Now, when I've got my ochre here, I put a little bit of titanium on. Now, instead of using this whole area shading this whole area and using a bit of it, I'm shading a little bit of it. Things like titanium can be very overpowering. It's a very strongly saturated paint. You'll find as you get into painting more, some colors will overtake a color mix, and others you can be a little bit more abundant with your choices. So you just got to be careful about what ones you are going with. So I've got a bit of a mixture here, so I'm just going to, don't like that. Let's just mix that together. How's this? Ah, I do like that. So I'm rather liking my mixture of my ochre and my titanium, and I'm using that as a sort of a mid value here. Now it's not quite gray, but it's a lot more interesting than where if I had mixed a black and white mixture. So once again, just utilize your colors, and there's nothing like just spending a day mixing colors and seeing what they do. Whenever I mix colors during a session, I'm still experimenting. I'm still seeing, oh, that worked, let's go with that, or that didn't work, etc. Okay, so I've just got this sort of I made like a little purpley mid value here. Don't mind that. And I think some of this purple I want to get into the face there too. Yeah, definitely like that. Okay. So I'm just going to bring some of these together. Oh, I like that area in the ear. Just going to add some more reddish sort of color there. Okay, so I'm just going to smoosh some of these together. I just want to see how they go together. I'm going to go over them afterwards, but I just want to see how they work together. Now, as I smoosh, I'm my brush picks up paint. So say this area, just like, okay, I'm liking this area, I'm keeping it light. But as I do this, I'm picking up paint. Now, it's a good thing if I want to use that paint elsewhere, not a good thing if I don't want to use that paint elsewhere. So whenever I take a little, I put some in there, I move it around. But sometimes I'll be cleaning off my brush if I don't want to. Okay. Now those areas, those lines between, like say this area here, here and here, I don't want to lose that. So if I bring this down here, I'm going to get rid of that dark value. Likewise, if I brought my brush up this way, I would bring the dark value up. So I want to be careful of these things. I don't want to get rid of some of the details that I'm liking there. But as you work through it and you start softening things, you might say, oh, as that goes, I want to make sure I keep that in. So I'm just going to pop things in a little bit more. I definitely like this area here for the head. So as I do that, I could go in with another brush. I'm using a round brush. I don't use a round brush very often, but lately I've been finding I don't mind them. So I'm just going to make a little dark value. I'm just going to bring back some of those details I had before. I didn't want to lose those. I lost a little bit in the smooshing. And let's just bring that down a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so I don't want this to be a like a 3-hour video, but this is where we're at the moment. Oh boy, hold on. Okay, so that's where we're at the moment. There's a painting I had done beforehand, which it wasn't a grisaille. It was just straight alla prima, which is just painting on site, wet on wet. So it was, it's quite pink. I liked the end results though. But with this particular one, what works, what the old masters, when they would do a painting of a portrait, and if they did like a green underpainting and then went over it as what we're doing here, the green underneath would just give a certain realism to the finished outcome of the portrait. And there are things when it says to do the color wheel, when you're making your color choices, not necessarily being a slave to your reference photo. You want to take, like I said, those values, and if you had a dark value of a red and you wanted to change that, say it was a dark value of a red on your photograph, but you didn't like that, you wanted to change it on your painting, you could go with another color, say a blue or something like that. Just make sure that it is the same darkness or value of what the one that you're trying to portray. So if you took a photograph, you put it into a monochromatic scheme and looked at all your lights and your darks values, you can reinterpret them with color, keeping in mind what works together. and what doesn't work together. Sometimes what doesn't work together can be make an interesting experiment as well. But if you want to play it a little safe, and I do many times, things like red and green, they work well together, such as in working a Verdaille and or in just regular compositions, just working a red and green together, a yellow and a violet. They go well together. An orange and blue, all these, opposite end of the spectrum, they will work well together. And then there's more to it from there, but that would be a different class. So essentially, that is it. So I will post some photographs of the finished product when I am done, but I think that pretty much explains how to work a Verdaille and make it into a finished portrait. I hope this helped, and if you have any questions, please just drop me a line at on my Facebook page, and yeah, enjoy. Bye bye.